Lucas Kessels, and this is Andy Jones with Rooted Arbor Care.
Today we are doing, to my knowledge, the first real review of the new TreeAustria Pro saddle. I reached out to Dreher and TreeAustria 6 months ago inquiring about a hopeful new saddle to replace the TreeAustria 3.2, and it just happened to be that they were getting ready to release this one, so they are kind enough to send us a few to run through their paces. So after 4 months of putting these through their paces, you know, each one of us probably 3 or 4 times a week, I feel like we've come to the point where we can give a really thorough, unbiased review for this. I will start with Lucas. What's some of the pros in your mind on the comfort spectrum?
Yeah, so a couple things I really like about the TreeAustria Pro is the high back. There's great padding for the back, especially for lower back support when you're in the tree, regardless of what position you're in during the climb. Also, coupled with the suspenders, I'm running Weaver suspenders on these. Great hookup points for those, whether it's a X back or a Y back setup. I would say, along with coupled with the leg setup on this belt, it's very comfortable to climb in.
So one of our favorite things about this saddle, in my mind, I think you agree with me too, is the connection point. So it's got relatively traditional hip rings. They're offset some though, so they flare out, so it's really easy when you're coming over to the lanyard. Obviously it's a chainsaw lanyard, but it catches them real good, keeps them off your hips. They have some really nice reinforcement padding behind the actual ring itself, so you don't get a whole bunch of hip pressure when you're lanyarded in. But what really makes this saddle special, and what in my mind puts it up in the same realm as the Tree Motions or like the Ergovation or any of those kind of saddles, is these semi-rigid thigh rings. So yeah, these semi-rigid loops are, in my mind, just as easy to attach to with like your double action snaps or triple action snaps or your traditional carabiners. Just easy to get on those is like a Tree Motion saddle springs. So here I have a Tree Motion Evo. Obviously you have a big nice thigh ring clip into that. It's aluminum, so it's still rigid, but while wearing this, it's just as easy in my mind to hook on to. The advantage is you're not going to ever worry about cross-loading or side-loading your carabiner. Because it is textile, you have a little more movement, so you have even less pressure attached to your hardware. And then if you wanted to get in and change your bridge or add any hardware, there's some really cool options for that.
Yeah, one of the great features about this belt is the solid ring here. It's very similar and an improved version of the Petzl
Ring open, yeah.
Ring open. When it's got, instead of one screw, there's two. I've taken one out just for expedience here in the video, but real simple Allen key takes this out. Your bolt comes out.
Don't lose your screw.
Yeah, and then this piece of the ring just slides out super easy. So if I want to take and remove the ring, put a swivel on the bridge instead, very simple. There's also, this is worth mentioning, there's also 2 adjustment points for ride height for your legs. So if you need it a little higher, you have 2 options there, higher or lower. This goes back in, put your bridge back on. Screws and you're back in business.
So one of my favorite components of this saddle is that there's no real rules for how many bridges you can have. So TreeAustria sends 1 strap gate, and the designer Mark is adamant that he prefers strap bridges as opposed to rope bridges, just for safety. I'm traditionally more of a rope bridge guy, but after running this saddle for so long, I haven't felt any hindrance or any real drawback to the strap bridge. But I have on my saddle, I'll show you, I've installed an actual, one of my Sequoia bridges. But you could take any sold rope bridge, whether it's a Tree Motion bridge, a Sequoia bridge, or even like a 10 mil press, like anything with a sewn eye, and you can put as many as you can fit on this ring. There's no restriction there. As long as it's a life rated attachment, you can put it right in there and you're good to go with that. So that, to me, it was an initial drawback when I was first kind of overviewing the saddle, and as I started to tinker with it, I found that I loved the versatility. So I think one of the major other benefits of this saddle is the various amounts of gear storage you have. You have these hard loops, they're semi-rigid loops, we'll call them, that are great for racking. There's 4 of those. There's, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 of these smaller loops. They're all rated at 5 kilograms a piece. And then you have these guys down here that are also rated at 5 kilograms a piece in rating, but in reality, after talking to the designer, these are strong enough to be life rated. They just haven't gone through the life rated process, so you have no fear of ripping these. Initially, when I saw these, I was like, there's no way I'm hanging all my gear on that rack. It just seems cumbersome. But this is almost exclusively where I keep my gear now. It keeps everything, you know, in the perfect orientation at all times. You get a good memorization. They're so rigid, you're not sitting back behind yourself trying to find it and missing. It just goes in first time every time. So I find that I don't even really use these that much. When I need them, I like them because it's easy to rack them, and because it is on a 45, everything kind of flows down to oneself, so you're not losing your gear. I know you have a little bit different take on these loops than I do, but for me, they're a pro. What do you have?
Yeah, so the biggest con that I have with these loops is really because I use a shim beaner for my saw carry tool. So if you can see, there's one of these loops is right in the way of where I would like to ideally attach my shim beaner. So I've just went over top of it, putting the loop underneath. I still am able to utilize some of this loop, but it does cause a little bit of pressure on the inside just because it's an added pressure point there. Andrew, he climbs with it not behind the shim beaner. He doesn't have any complications with it. It caused me a little bit of trouble.
To that point though, with the shim beaner, I would say the biggest con of the saddle in general is how wide these gaps are between the stitch marks. So it's not as big of a con to me anymore, but initially I am a big fan of the DMM vault gates or pretzel care tools. There's just too much play, like you can see with the shim beaner, how much room you have for it to slide. There's too much play for those devices to, and they'll work, but I don't want that slop in my system. So the only tool carrier that we found that work well is the Rock Exotica transporter, and that's only because you have 4 different screw attachments, so you can really lock it down. But with the shim beaner, I would ideally like it right here. There's just too much play. So then I get a lot of side wobble, and I found that my saw was able to get off the shim beaner if I was at all inverted. So that's by far the biggest con, but really it's not a major issue. Like, he's found a great workaround. For me, it hasn't bothered me as much as I thought. And because we talked about all these, you know, auxiliary loops, I don't even use tool carriers anymore. It's no longer a necessity for me. Even with like the Tree Motion, I had a bunch of rack areas, but I still always relied on the tool carriers. With this saddle, with the exception of like one primary tool or anything within the process, all of my gear, all my life rated gear is on my left side. It's all ready to rock. I know right where it's at. Then all my rigging gear or tools is on my right hip instead of my left hip. I know exactly where everything's going to be every time. It's a non-issue.
Another huge point I'd like to hit on is just the med pack storage.
Oh yeah.
This is a great improvement from, I would say, any saddle that we have ever looked at or used in the field. Just the orientation of it, the tightness of holding the pack itself, and it also has underneath there's these 2 great loops where Andrew uses a little Weaver carry bag. But just, it's out of the way, it's high, and where the placement is, if in case of an emergency you had to get into it, it can still be accessed very easily because of the high back.
Yeah, so these straps here are really strong elastic, but they're not flimsy. The only saddle that I would say comes close to the convenience of the med pack storage on the TreeAustria Pro would be like the newer camp saddles. But like one of the biggest issues with the Tree Motion is the med pack storage. So this saddle here, my primary saddle for years, but it has hard nylon, no elasticity to it. So it's really easy for these to walk off over time or get locked up because they almost get, you know, dry rot from sweat and rain and sawdust and all those things. In the event of emergency, I can rip off one corner here and deploy my pack. But I have to be intentional about it. If I wanted to get my med pack out of the Tree Motion or a Buckingham or a Petzl saddle, I have to almost use 2 hands. And then usually you're backing it up with the carabiner because you're worried that it's going to slip. That issue has been completely alleviated with TreeAustria. So kind of a general overview of the saddle. We love the comfort. It's a very lightweight but also sturdy saddle. High back support like you talked about. The legs are phenomenal. You can see the placement of the thigh rings. It's in a really good position if you want to cross over lanyard from hip to thigh. It's really easy, takes a lot of the pressure off. This bridge, which it seems kind of short, and I used to prefer long bridges, but now that we're climbing almost exclusively SRT or SRS, I'm finding more and more that I prefer the short bridge. I just get a lot more rope capture when I'm ascending.
Kind of like we had hit on before, the legs have great padding, very great adjustment for going up and down, depending on where you'd like it on your hamstring. The connection on the legs is very quick. These Cobra buckles, great snapping in and out. And
real quick, sorry to interrupt you there. That's I think one of the most underrated portions of this saddle is where the attachment actually is on the inside under the ring instead of on the leg pad like they typically are. So you have the tensioner out here, but the capture point is actually on the inside, so you don't have anything catching that buckle and releasing it like I've seen with the other saddles where it'll kind of walk off and it'll stay attached obviously, but your saddle will loosen up on you. So that I think is a big advantage of the TreeAustria Pro.
Absolutely. And then again, like we mentioned, the high back, the med pack, very easy to get to in a pinch. The gear storage.
Yeah, you want to hit a rack or hit
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're carrying your akimbo over here, that's just right into the webbing. Very simple. Left hand, I'm right-handed, so even either side is very, very easy to get to.
The hard rack storage is great. The med pack, like you said, is very accessible. I think that the biggest thing is you're getting a lightweight package. You're getting all the modern, the key features that we want to see in a high-end saddle. So this retails for right at $499. So when you're spending $500, you're right up there. You're above the Petzl Sequoia price. You're with the Tree Motion. You're up in some of the Buckingham saddles, the high-end camps. You want to have additional rings down here. You want thigh attachment points, not just hip rings. You want versatile gear storage. You want the ability to put on aftermarket accessories like your Roxotica transporter or D&M vault gates or all those kind of things. So this just checks, all of the box. Excellent hardware. The textiles are excellent. The comfort's great. Other than kind of that real small issue with our stall carrier attachment point, we would like it to be kind of right in here somewhere. Other than that, I can't think of any other real cons.
Yeah, I would say overall it's a great belt. I've liked it more than any belt I've ever climbed on. I know we've tested out a bunch of different ones, from the Tree Motion down to your regular standard Buckingham saddles.
Yeah,
this one I would say surpasses by far.
I think this is saddle 7 for me, and it's going to be hard. I'm gonna have a hard time finding one that I prefer. So the Tree Motion was always kind of the gold standard for the last 5 years that we kept going back to, and I think at least going forward until the next one comes out, this is saddle number 1 in my inventory.
Absolutely.
I would assume so for yours too.
For sure.
All right, guys. Well, that's our review on the TreeAustria Pro.
Thank you.